Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So when I am not gaming or working on my own epic fantasy novel, which you may one day read, I try to find time to do as much reading as I can. Yes, I'm still reading The Wheel of Time, and no, I don't know when I'm making the next video on that. The past week, I managed to catch up on some of my light novel reads and started a new series called So You Wanna Live the Slow Life? A Guide to Life in the Beastly Wilds. Now, I won't lie. I saw the chipmunk girl on the cover and I was immediately intrigued. A light novel set in modern Japan, cute chipmunk girls, and a slice of life? Yes, please. I've been hearing about all these recent books being published as cozy fiction, and I'm thinking maybe this might be a good entry point. No high school kid reborn as a 10th son to a lesser noble house that has to unite the kingdom and defeat the dreaded demon lord while juggling a harem of girls that never get past the hand-holding stage of romantic cringe. So You Wanna Live the Slow Life is the story of Mikuta Moriya, a 25-year-old businessman who volunteers to take over his late grandfather's estate. It's a complicated situation where someone has to physically live on the estate because of a contract agreement between his family and the inhabitants of an area of land in Japan known as the Beastly Wilds, which is where this estate resides. The inhabitants of the wilds are beast people, and in keeping with tradition, a member of his family must live in the wilds and maintain a grove of walnut and chestnut trees with the help of the chipmunk tribe. It's complicated, slightly convoluted, but bottom line, you move in and you live there as a resident of the wilds for the rest of your life, which is why I'm sure no one in his family wanted to take on the job after Gramps kicked the bucket. In exchange for doing all the heavy lifting in the orchard of nut trees, the chipmunks get a portion of the sales at harvest. And this contract has been going on with his family for a long time. Because Mikuta finds himself alone and literally in the woods, he decides to tap into a hobby that he happens to share with his late grandfather, the art of preserving food. He gets introduced to the cute but rather aloof chipmunk girl Techi, who is a school teacher that oversees the younger chipmunk kids who actually do the day-to-day work in the orchard because of reasons that involve young chipmunk kids not being fully humanoid until they grow up. And so when they're small, they can scamper and climb like actual chipmunks in the trees and do orchard stuff. This is where I thought that the story was going to take us. We would get a slice of life setting where Mikuta would spend his days getting to know the local beast people and their customs, and then practice his fledgling skills at making delicious jams and jellies, and maybe a possible romance with Techi, the cute chipmunk girl. But unfortunately, that was not the case. No sooner do we get settled into this world of potential than the writer Fudo turns it into yet another Japanese guy cooks food story. And almost all progress going forward slows to an effing crawl. I'm not against cooking in fiction. I mean, I'm not against cooking. I love me a good meal, but something that seems to plague the light novel scene is all the cooking. I get it. You're a dude that's been reincarnated into another world or summoned to a strange land of fantasy, and all you have on your dinner plate is dried fish and pottage. You want some home cooking. I won't fault you. But the overemphasis on food production in light novels is troublesome. There's a difference in a story where our hero is, say, traveling and they got to make camp and they pull out the dried beef and the hardtack. And a story where they're traveling along and the protagonist makes a 6-course meal out of whatever wild game they happened to catch a few minutes before. Not to mention the excruciating detail in which these meals are prepared, served, Eat dakimasu and everyone has mouthgasms. Wash, rinse, and repeat. So when I tell you that this series of light novels dives into the fine art of cooking balls deep, I mean it. Mikuta doesn't just cook a meal, he actually goes over the recipe as though he were reading the step-by-step instructions from a cookbook in his head, complete with paragraphs of italicized text. For every page of story progression, there seems to be at least 2 pages of cooking something. Now, I'm sure there are readers that love cooking in light novels, and hey, you know what? That's perfectly fine. To each their own. However, this brings me to another issue that I have with cooking in light novels, and it's very much akin to the overpowered protagonist trope. Only instead of having all the magical power and being level 900, we have a protagonist that can literally make any dish in existence, and it always, without exception, comes out perfect and delicious. Even when it's made in a cave from a leftover box of scraps. At some point, my suspension of disbelief gets broken, and I realize that this guy is like only 25 and he's works as a career businessman. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but realistically, he wouldn't have time to make much more than a microwave cup of ramen, let alone manage to learn or have time to make 1,000,001 recipes or to perfect them, to say nothing of his food preservation hobbies. Suddenly, our protagonist has gone from average businessman to Super Saiyan Chef Ramsay, and I just don't believe it. By the time we get a few chapters into volume 2 of the series, he's managed to awkwardly say a few words to the chipmunk girl, and now she's his fiancée. Just like that. He says something about wishing he could have cute chipmunk kids, like the ones that work in the orchard, and she's now his bride-to-be. Totally makes sense. Also, spoilers. Do they then spend critical time developing their literally non-existent romance? No, because he's too busy cooking shit and explaining it to us like he's making a 30-minute YouTube video. Does he actually get to making preserves? Sort of, on occasion, when he's not too busy cooking shit and explaining it to us like it's a 30-minute cooking video on YouTube. By the time I finished the 3rd volume, my head was spinning. I was actively skimming over large portions of the text just to get to actual story progression. I wanted the book to be over. Never have I experienced a book that used cooking as a crutch for storytelling to this extent, and I think I may know why. The issue is in the premise. So, when you have a story about a slow life set in an orchard, yeah, it's gonna be kind of boring. Early in the 1st volume, we get a glimpse of the day-to-day, which is Mikuta comes out and sits with Techi in the shade, and they watch the kids work. He drinks some tea, they watch the kids do more work. He has lunch, the kids work, they go home, he goes to bed. Wash, rinse, and repeat. So at some point, I think it was clear that more was going to need to be added to the story. A hobby was needed. And rather than have a story where a guy struggles to learn to make preserved foods, which would have been interesting, and we could have gotten to see all of those antics, we get a guy who already knows how. And to pad out the runtime, we get lots of cooking. Sure, most of the meals have something to do loosely with preservation. It's still at its core just another cooking story. So then the biggest issues aren't that there's cooking, it's that the writer wasn't creative enough to craft a story without leaning into the overuse of cooking as a means of getting us from scene to scene. The whole preservation thing stems from the fact that it's become popular for protagonists in light novels to have some very specific hobby or a unique interest that then becomes the method that will be employed to save the kingdom. We have a writer that, say, loves feudal Japanese history, so we get In Another World as Oda Nobunaga for the 1000th time. Or we have a writer whose hobby is repairing old typewriters, and so we get Saving the World with My Overpowered Typing Skills. And because cooking is something everyone can relate to, we get book after book of our main character crying and moaning about how there's never enough curry, and then magically makes it, and everyone loves him, and they get on that dick. And the new curry shop he opened in medieval fantasy land has a line of customers around the block hungry for that tasty, rich, and spicy exotic food they've just been introduced to, because he's just that good. Most of these problems stem from writers of light novels having little in the way of actual real-world experience with which they can draw from. So they default to what they know, and more often than not, it's cooking, because everybody knows cooking. It's like that comedy sketch from Eddie Murphy where he was talking about being a young wannabe comedian and that he could only make poop jokes because at his age, taking a dump was the only life experience that he had. I really wanted this series to work. I thought the setting was different and unique. Even the world building, such as it was pretty original. But it all got shoved out of the way in favor of cooking filler. And so after the 3rd volume, it went firmly on the DNF list. If you really like stories with an overabundance of cooking, then you may enjoy this. But otherwise, I cannot recommend it. So You Want to Live the Slow Life is a huge mess, and I can only rate it about 2 out of 5. And that's mostly for what little originality it had. So now, it's time to do that thing where we get your feedback on all this. Have you read So You Want to Live the Slow Life? And if you did, what are your thoughts on it? Also, what is your take on all the cooking in light novels? Love it? Hate it? Head down to the comments and let's get some conversation going. Guys, that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this one, as well as the occasional live stream, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you want to catch my Twitch streams, there is a link to that, including my social hangouts, in the linkity-link place down below. And as always, have an amazing day, guys. Keep being awesome, and I will see you all in the next video.